In the remote village of Blackwood, nestled deep within the dense forests of northern England, there stood a manor that the locals dared not approach. Blackwood Manor had a reputation, one steeped in dark history and whispered legends. It was said that the manor was haunted by the spirit of its former master, Lord Nathaniel Blackwood, a man known for his cruelty and wickedness in life. Nathaniel Blackwood had been a feared figure in the 18th century, infamous for his insatiable greed and the dark rituals he practiced in secret. It was rumored that he had made a pact with malevolent forces, exchanging his soul for wealth and power. His death, however, was shrouded in mystery. One stormy night, the villagers heard his agonized screams echo through the forest, but when they ventured to the manor the next morning, they found no sign of him, only bloodstains that led into the depths of the woods. The manor was abandoned after his disappearance, left to rot as the forest slowly reclaimed it. But the legend of Lord Blackwood lived on. Those who ventured too close to the manor would speak of an overwhelming sense of dread, as if the air itself were heavy with malice. And at night, faint whispers could be heard, carried on the wind whispers that seemed to beckon the living to come closer. For decades, the manor remained undisturbed, until one day, a young historian named Evelyn Thorne arrived in Blackwood. She was fascinated by the occult and the unexplained, and the tale of Blackwood Manor intrigued her. The villagers warned her against going, their voices filled with genuine fear, but Evelyn was determined to uncover the truth behind the legend. Evelyn set out for the manor one crisp autumn morning, armed with a journal, a flashlight, and her unwavering curiosity. As she approached the dilapidated structure, she could feel the weight of its history pressing down on her, but she pushed forward. The door creaked open with an eerie groan, revealing a grand entrance hall covered in dust and cobwebs. The air inside was cold, unnaturally so, and the silence was oppressive. Evelyn began her exploration, documenting every detail. The walls were adorned with portraits of the Blackwood family, their eyes seeming to follow her every move. But it was the portrait of Nathaniel Blackwood that drew her attention. His piercing gaze and cruel smile sent a shiver down her spine. As she stood before the portrait, the temperature in the room plummeted. Evelyn's breath came out in visible puffs, and she felt a presence behind her, though she was alone. Suddenly, the portrait began to change before her eyes. Nathaniel's expression twisted into one of malevolent glee, and the room was filled with the sound of distant laughter, deep, resonant, and unmistakably evil. Evelyn turned to flee, but the door slammed shut on its own, trapping her inside. The laughter grew louder, echoing through the manor, as shadows began to move of their own accord, coalescing into a dark figure that hovered just beyond the edge of the light. "Welcome to my home," a voice whispered, sending icy tendrils of fear down Evelyn's spine. "I've been waiting for someone like you." Evelyn's flashlight flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. Panic set in, and she fumbled for the door, but it wouldn't budge. The voice continued, closer now, taunting her with promises of endless torment. "You will never leave, just like the others." In her final moments of terror, Evelyn realized the truth. Nathaniel Blackwood had not just disappeared, he had transcended death, becoming something far worse. His spirit had been twisted by the dark forces he once served, and now he was bound to the manor, eternally tormenting those who dared to enter. The villagers never saw Evelyn Thorne again. Some say they still hear her screams on stormy nights, mingling with the laughter of Lord Blackwood. And the manor, it stands as it always has, a decaying monument to a wicked soul, waiting for its next victim. But the legend doesn't end there. Rumors have begun to circulate of strange occurrences in the village itself, doors opening on their own, shadows that move without light, and the chilling sensation of being watched. It seems that Nathaniel Blackwood's reach is growing, extending beyond the confines of his manor. The villagers live in fear, knowing that something evil stirs in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to strike. And as the nights grow longer, they wonder who will be the next to fall under the curse of Blackwood Manor. The disappearance of Evelyn Thorne sent ripples of unease through the village of Blackwood. The once quiet village now felt as if it were living under a shadow, a palpable tension hanging in the air. Whispers spread among the villagers, stories of Evelyn's fate mingling with the old legends. Yet, No one dared to speak openly about the manor or what might have happened to her. Weeks passed, and the village remained on edge. Then, strange things began to happen. It started with small incident stores, and the villagers' homes would creak open in the middle of the night. Furniture would be found moved in the morning, and the cold spots that had once been confined to the manor seemed to be spreading. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, an elderly villager named Mrs. Hargrove ventured to the local pub, hoping to find some comfort in familiar faces. She had lived in Blackwood her entire life and knew the stories better than most. Her hands shook as she sipped her tea, her eyes darting to the windows as if expecting something to peer in from the darkness. "I saw her," she finally whispered, her voice trembling. The other patrons turned to her, curiosity mixed with dread. "Who?" one of the younger men asked, leaning closer. "Evelyn, Mrs. Hargrove replied, her eyes wide with fear. "I saw her standing at the edge of the woods, near the manor. But it wasn't really her. She was different." The pub fell silent as she continued. She looked like herself, but her eyes, they were empty, like she wasn't there anymore. And there was something else. A shadow, a figure standing just behind her, almost controlling her. A chill ran through the room, and the villagers exchanged nervous glances. The pub owner, a burly man named Tom, spoke up, trying to dispel the growing fear. "You've just had too much of a scare, Mrs. Hargrove. Maybe it was a trick of the light." But Mrs. Hargrove shook her head. "No, Tom. It was real. I felt it. Something evil is coming, and it's not just the manor anymore. Whatever happened to Evelyn, it's spreading." That night, sleep eluded the villagers. The sense of unease had grown into a full-blown terror, a knowing fear that something was indeed lurking in the shadows. And then the dreams began. One by one, the villagers started having the same nightmare. In it, they found themselves standing before Blackwood Manor, the building looming over them like a predator. The air was thick with decay, and the ground beneath their feet felt as if it were alive, pulsing with some dark energy. They would hear whispers, low and insidious, beckoning them to come closer. In the dream, they would approach the manor, unable to stop themselves. The door would swing open, revealing the interior bathed in a sickly, unnatural light. And then, they would see him, Lord Nathaniel Blackwood, standing in the center of the grand hall, his eyes gleaming with malice. His voice, cold and mocking, would echo in their minds. "You cannot escape me." The dream would end with them trapped inside the manor, the doors slamming shut, and the feeling of icy hands wrapping around their throats. Each villager would wake in a cold sweat, their hearts racing, the sensation of those ghostly hands lingering long after the dream had ended. It wasn't long before the first villager went missing. A young man named Jacob, who had been one of the most vocal in dismissing the legends, disappeared one night without a trace. His home was found in disarray, furniture overturned, and the front door hanging open. The only clue was a single footprint in the mud outside, a footprint that led straight toward Blackwood Manor. Panic set in. The village council convened in a desperate attempt to find a solution, but no one dared to venture near the manor. The fear was too great, and the memories of those nightmares too fresh. And then, just as quickly as they had started, the nightmares stopped. The village fell into an uneasy calm, though no one believed the danger had passed. If anything, the silence seemed more ominous, as if the evil was merely biding its time. One night, a strange visitor arrived in Blackwood, a tall, thin man with a pale complexion and piercing blue eyes. He claimed to be an investigator of the paranormal, sent to look into the disturbances. He introduced himself as Dr. Alaric Graves, a name that no one recognized, but his demeanor exuded confidence, and the villagers, desperate for help, welcomed him. Drive. Graves wasted no time. He set up a base in the village and began his investigation, asking the villagers about their dreams, the strange occurrences, and the history of the manor. He was particularly interested in the accounts of Lord Nathaniel Blackwood and his dark rituals. As Dr. Graves delved deeper into the mystery, he uncovered something that had been lost to time, a hidden journal, buried in the archives of a nearby town. The journal belonged to one of Nathaniel Blackwood's servants, who had witnessed his master's descent into madness. The final entry was cryptic but chilling. He has found the key to eternal life, but at what cost? The ritual is complete, and now he is bound to this place, neither living nor dead. I fear for my soul, for he has promised that none shall escape his grasp. Drive. Graves knew then that the evil in Blackwood Manor was not just the ghost of a wicked man, but something far more sinister. Nathaniel Blackwood had indeed transcended death, but in doing so, he had become a vessel for a dark force, one that was now seeping into the village itself. As Dr. Graves prepared to confront the entity, the villagers began to notice something strange. Evelyn Thorne's journal had been left behind at the inn, but new entries had appeared in her handwriting. Entries that detailed her descent into madness, her dreams blending with reality, and her eventual surrender to the darkness that now consumed her. The final entry, written in a hand far too steady for someone in her state, simply read, "He is coming for you. Drive." Graves knew that time was running out. The curse of Blackwood Manor was spreading, and unless he could find a way to break it, the entire village would soon fall under its shadow. But as he prepared for the final confrontation, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that every step he took was being guided by a malevolent force that was always one step ahead. And in the dead of night, as he stood before the manor, ready to face whatever lay within, the wind carried a whisper to his ears, cold, mocking, and unmistakably familiar. "You cannot escape me. Drive." Alaric Graves stood before Blackwood Manor, the crumbling edifice looming like a specter against the moonless sky. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the rustling of the dead leaves at his feet. Clutching a bundle of ancient texts and protective charms, he took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The manor greeted him with a suffocating darkness, the interior swallowed by shadows that seemed to pulse with malevolence. As he stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind him with a deafening crash, sealing him within. The air grew cold, so cold that his breath turned to mist before him. Drive. Graves knew there was no turning back. The curse that plagued the village had to be stopped, and the source of it all, Nathaniel Blackwood, had to be confronted. But as he ventured deeper into the manor, the shadows seemed to close in around him, twisting and writhing like living things. He found himself in the grand hall, the very heart of the manor. The walls were lined with portraits of the Blackwood family, their eyes following his every move. At the center of the room stood the portrait of Nathaniel Blackwood, his cruel smile now a ghoulish grin that seemed to widen as Dr. Graves approached. The room was deathly silent, save for the faint echo of his footsteps on the marble floor. Drive. Graves began to recite the incantations he had painstakingly researched, his voice steady but strained. The words echoed through the hall, reverberating off the walls, but there was no response, no sign that his efforts were having any effect. Suddenly, the ground beneath him trembled, and a cold wind swept through the hall, extinguishing the candles in their sconces. The shadows surged forward, enveloping Dr. Graves in darkness. He could feel their icy tendrils wrapping around him, pulling him toward the center of the room. And then, he saw it, a figure emerging from the darkness, tall and thin, with eyes like burning coals. Nathaniel Blackwood. But he was no longer human. His form was twisted and grotesque, a mockery of the man he had once been. His skin was ashen, his features distorted, and his eyes. Those eyes were filled with a malevolent hunger. "Did you think you could defeat me?" Blackwood's voice was a low, guttural rasp, filled with contempt. "You are but a pawn, drawn here by your own arrogance. Drive." Graves tried to move, to speak, but the shadows held him fast, tightening their grip with every passing second. His heart raced as he realized the truth: he had walked into a trap. Everything he had done, every step he had taken, had been orchestrated by Blackwood. "You see, Doctor," Blackwood continued, his voice dripping with malice, "I am no mere ghost. I am a conduit, a vessel for a power far greater than you could ever comprehend. And now, you will join me, as countless others have before you." With a gesture, Blackwood extended a bony hand, and the shadows surged forward, engulfing Dr. Graves in their icy embrace. Pain racked his body as the darkness invaded every part of him, seeping into his mind, his soul. He could feel himself being pulled apart, his very essence being consumed by the malevolent force that controlled Blackwood. As his vision blurred and his thoughts fragmented, he could see flashes of the village Blackwood, now shrouded in darkness, its streets empty, its houses cold and lifeless. The villagers had all fallen under the curse, their minds twisted, their bodies mere husks controlled by the will of Nathaniel Blackwood. The entire village was now his domain, a place of eternal torment and suffering. And then, just as his consciousness began to fade, Dr. Graves saw a final, terrible vision: his own face, twisted and distorted, reflected back at him in the darkness. He was no longer Dr. Alaric Graves. He was something else, something dark and terrible, bound to the will of Blackwood for all eternity. With one final scream, his soul was consumed, leaving behind only a hollow shell. The shadows receded, and Nathaniel Blackwood stood alone in the grand hall, a satisfied smile playing across his twisted features. Outside, the village of Blackwood was silent, its once vibrant community now a place of death and decay. The curse had spread, its influence growing stronger with each passing day, and in the dead of night, if one dared to venture near the manor, they might hear the faint echoes of laughter, cold, mocking, and filled with an endless, insatiable hunger. The legend of Blackwood Manor would live on, but there would be no more heroes, no more saviors. The curse was complete, the evil triumphant, and the village of Blackwood was lost forever. **** The end. ***.